What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my man in the corner, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, well, they played their first preseason game over the weekend, and there is plenty to take away from. But really, the biggest point of conversation remains the quarterback battle and where the Pittsburgh Steelers stand with Justin Fields after his first start and where Russell Wilson may have climbed himself into by just not playing. Meanwhile, I've got some updates on Brandon Aiyuk and where the Pittsburgh Steelers currently stand in the trade situation with the San Francisco 49ers. And another name that I am hearing is quote-unquote in play for the Pittsburgh Steelers as we move forward. And as we do every single day, we will answer all of your questions. So make sure that you are tossing all of them in the chat. I will say that I apologize if there's a little bit of an echo. I will apologize if the screen setup is a little weird. This is day one, new office at the new crib. Things are not finalized yet, but we're getting here. It was a spur of the moment thing to come here, and well, here we are. So I will ask, as I do every day, how I feel, my friend.
I'm feeling good. I dodged the hurricane, was all sunshine down in Myrtle Beach this weekend. So I can put that on my resume. I've officially dodged a hurricane, although that's not something I want to make a habit of doing. But it was nice. It was a fun weekend, nice reset, and ready to talk football and really ready to get the regular season going because that little taste on Friday was all it took for me to say, all right, now I want week one.
Yeah, I agree. First off, I'm glad that you dodged the hurricane. I'm glad that there were no hurricane issues down in Myrtle Beach. You texted me and I was cracking up. I was like, man, dude, it feels good that a lot of people are very into making sure Nick is okay and doesn't get drowned during a hurricane. So appreciate that. The football was nice. It was great to be there. I got home about like 1 a.m. and I walked through the door. My wife is passed out. She's just completely asleep. I crawl into bed about 2:30 and I was just laying there. I was like, this is nice. We're back. Football is officially here. This is when things get good. It was exciting. It was an exciting time, and there is plenty to talk about from it. Obviously, we're going to dive into the quarterback situation. Justin Fields, did he play himself out of a job in Pittsburgh? And where does Russell Wilson stand? What we're getting from practice ever since. I will say I appreciate everybody who's tossing in all the comments about the new setup. Very appreciative of it. We'll have more. It's a work in progress. In the next week or so, it'll be 100% complete. And the bamboo plant, excuse me, I'm slipping over my words here, in the other room, right in the window, getting all the sun because that thing is alive, well, and killing it. But we'll have more plants. Don't even worry about it. We'll start the day off with a great question from our boy Michael. Does state tax affects Brandon Aiyuk's situation? $28 million in Pennsylvania is more than $32 million in California. Also, UC Dulac's report about Troy Fautanu starting week one at right tackle. We'll address the Brandon Aiyuk situation first. Look, everybody wants to talk about the tax situation. I know the article that people are referencing when they talk about the tax situation and, is this Brandon Aiyuk looking at $32 million compared to $28 million, you're going to lose more money. Obviously, when you're making that much money, the taxes are, pretty significant. I'll say this. I understand that a 0.51% difference is significantly more when we're talking about a guy who's going to make $28 million a year compared to a guy who's going to make $46,000 a year or whatever the average in America is. That being said, this is not the Brandon Aiyuk side of things. That is not what we're worried about. That's not what the Pittsburgh Steelers are concerning themselves with. The Brandon Aiyuk side of things with the Pittsburgh Steelers is already done. And from what I've been told, they have pretty much agreed upon a contract if the trade were to happen. It's the San Francisco side of things, which we'll dive into after I address the Troy Fautanu thing, of why things are not progressing and why things are not moving forward. As for Troy Fautanu, yes, I did see the report from Jerry Dulac. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. I thought Troy had his ups and his downs during the preseason game. I think he's had his ups and his downs throughout training camp. But I will say that if that's the direction that they're going in, if they're ready to make that leap and just say, hey, screw it, we're ready to have Broderick Jones at the left side and Troy Fautanu on the right side, I'm all about it. I'm okay with that. Toss Zach Frazier in there as well. And Just roll with the punches of the young, developing offensive line. I think that's the future. I'm okay with it right now. Even if I believe that Troy Fautanu could use some time on the bench, I'm okay with it. I'm not upset about Troy Fautanu starting, even if he isn't developed. I'll toss that one to you before I dive into more Brandon Aiyuk here. Troy starting week 1, even if he doesn't play the rest of the preseason, seemingly just saying, screw it, we're going with the younger group. What are your thoughts?
I think it was trending in that direction. Considering what you saw last week during practice, you saw Troy start to get in at right tackle, even when Broderick wasn't playing with the ones. And I thought some of us thought, all right, well, maybe Broderick's just taking a step back because he's dealing with his own, bumps and bruises. But at the same time, you saw Troy take those opportunities, and he looked pretty good when he had those opportunities with the ones during practice last week. And like you mentioned, during the preseason game, it was up and down. But it is kind of surprising to me that with a first rounder, considering what the Steelers typically do, they're going to say, all right, well, you're not going to play the rest of the preseason, but we do have you penciled in as the starter for week 1. A little surprising to me, but again, it's where it was progressing, and you just have to hope that these 2 weeks don't kind of hamper that progression that he had made through the first 2 weeks of training camp.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think that even if there are a hiccup in week 1 or week 2, the first half of the season is favorable enough to where you can develop and grow out of those growing pains before you hit the back half and you start to have to worry. And if there are going to be growing pains, yeah, stick them on the field and see what happens. But I'm all for it. I'm not upset about it. I've been probably the biggest proponent of Troy Fautanu grabbing the starting job throughout training camp. I might be the only one left who's like, there have been moments where I'm a little bit disappointed in his play. But overall, if that's the direction that they're going in, no complaints whatsoever about where we're going. Let's talk Brandon Aiyuk. I spoke to a source this morning that told me 2 things. One, there's another name, quote unquote, in play for the Pittsburgh Steelers at wide receiver. And 2, when it comes to Brandon Aiyuk, there is a situation, and where that situation currently stands is the reason that, the Pittsburgh Steelers have not made a move for the San Francisco 49ers wide receiver, or why things have not developed to the point of where they are. The Pittsburgh Steelers have a trade offer in place. From what I have been told, from what everybody is reporting, the Pittsburgh Steelers have a trade offer on the table. It is a quote-unquote strong trade offer for the 49ers that they feel good about. The reason they are not budging, and everybody keeps tossing it out there, hey, toss this player out there. Hey, just juice up the deal. If they're asking for a second-round pick, you give them a second-round pick. Who cares? That's what you do. The reason they have not budged from where they stand is simply because they do not feel that anything further than where they are is as good as or matches the risk reward that comes with Brandon Aiyuk. And the reason that I say that, and I'm not trying to stir the pot, and I do not worry about this stuff until I need to worry about this stuff, and the Steelers should do the same. There are a number of guys who have been traded over the last year. I mean, highlighted right now by Hassan Reddick, and Stephon Diggs the other night in Houston did not do himself any favors with the fan base. The Pittsburgh Steelers are only going to give up so much for a player that comes with a little bit of worry. And anything past that, they're not willing to give up. Now, what the Pittsburgh Steelers have offered does not seem to match what the San Francisco 49ers want. And what I have been told is that the 49ers want, quote unquote, a king's ransom for Brandon Aiyuk. What that is, I do not know. People have said a second and a third round pick. I have been told maybe that's a little bit more than what they are looking for. I have also been told at one point, maybe they are asking for 2 first-round picks in return for Brandon Aiyuk, which is nuts. But that's where the Pittsburgh Steelers stand. On the other side of this, there is a name out there that is, quote unquote, once again, in play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That name is a very familiar one that I think a lot of people will see coming. It's Juju Smith-Schuster. And we could talk about, that's speculation, or everybody saying Juju makes a lot of sense. It was explained to me that Juju is in play for the Pittsburgh Steelers, that it is not intimate or why can I not get that word?
Imminent.
Thank you very much. Out of my mouth. But it is on the table for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the reason that they like Juju Smith-Schuster is because they believe he's much more reliable than his season in New England presented, that he is a veteran leader, that he fits the ground game very well as a blocker, and that he could work with guys like George Pickens and Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson to only add to a veteran group like Van Jefferson and Cordero Patterson and so on and so forth. They view him as a possibility. Again, Brandon Aiyuk is obviously option one, but they are not willing to give up more, and they look at Juju as a fallback option that they could say, hey, look at this guy's out here, and he's not going to cost nearly as much as Brandon Aiyuk. And yeah, he's not the player that Brandon Aiyuk is, but maybe we don't need to give up so much for a player. There are other options. Juju Smith-Schuster is on the table for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Your thoughts when I say that?
I like the guy off the field. On the field, I just personally don't see what he adds to the group that's already here. Van Jefferson coming into camp wasn't somebody I was overly excited about. He's opened my eyes a little bit. Let's not make no mistake about what Van Jefferson is. His best season was an 800-yard season, and the rest of those seasons haven't really been up to snuff with that. But he has been impressing me to what I expected of him. But I don't see Juju as a major upgrade over those guys. If anything, you're bringing him in here during camp to see if he can compete and steal that maybe wide receiver 5 spot from a Scotty Miller or from a Quez Watkins. Because I think that the other players there, one, some of them are younger with higher upside, and two, a guy in Van Jefferson who's been here this whole time, to me, represents the same exact thing as Juju without the prior history in Pittsburgh.
Okay. So am I wrong to think that maybe we're a little bit harsh on Juju after one bad year in New England? And I get the knee issues are a real thing, but they're not going to sign anybody without doing a thorough medical check where it's Juju is ready to go. Nothing is going to change. If the knee's ready to explode, you're not going to sign him either way. If his knee's fine and we're just making a bigger deal out of this, and sometimes reports are wrong. I mean, people are in the chat right now saying my reports are wrong. So sometimes reports are wrong. Am I wrong to say that maybe we're judging Juju a little bit too much? I mean, he's 933 yards and 3 touchdowns in Kansas City a year ago.
But again, to me, you look at that, it's Kansas City where he was the number one outside of Travis Kelce. So again, you have to weigh it between being a bad Patriots team where he performed poorly and a very good Super Bowl winning Kansas City Chiefs team with a very good quarterback. So the answer is somewhere in the middle. And to me, that just screams Van Jefferson with a team that has a new offensive coordinator and some quarterbacks who weren't awful last season. I mean, Russell Wilson wasn't awful last season. Justin had his ups and downs, but quarterbacks that do have question marks going into the season.
So are you comfortable if the Pittsburgh Steelers do not end up with Brandon Aiyuk and sign Juju as that 5th wide receiver?
Yeah. Him battling with Scotty Miller. And if he's better, then that's great. Then he can go above people and he can jump people in the organization, because that's what the Steelers have right now. It is a bunch of people that are going to be vying for that 2 through 5 spot all season long. It doesn't end as soon as week 1 starts. Whoever's going to be better, whoever's going to give you the better matchups, whoever's going to give you the best opportunity to succeed that week is probably who's going to get the more reps and the more snaps and the more looks. And if Juju can factor into that mix, then sure, let him come in and factor into that mix.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you tossed Quez Watkins' name out there the first time. I think we can rule out Quez Watkins. I don't think that's, you know what I mean? Like we're going to talk about Justin Fields losing a job. The only person that really lost a job in Pittsburgh this weekend was definitely Quez Watkins, which was unfortunate. I thought he had some upside, but rough one. Definitely a rough one. But I agree with you. I think that if he could come in here and beat Scotty Miller, maybe beat Dez Fitzpatrick, who had a good preseason game, then you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, he could block. He's a big body. He's a reliable set of hands. That's not bad. For cheap, for almost nothing. And a guy who could come in here who understands the city, who understands Mike Tomlin, who brings some veteran leadership. I think it all works out well if that's the option that they get. Obviously, Brandon Aiyuk is still the name to watch, but that's just what I've been told, you know? And unfortunately, if I could come in here and say, hey, guys, I've actually been told that Tyreek Hill is on his way to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's the name, and then I would. But I just report the names that are given to me. And this time, the name that was given to me may not be the best name, but a familiar name for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Next, let's talk about Justin Fields. His performance the other night, 5 for 6, 60-some yards, no touchdowns, fumbled 2 snaps, had 2 sacks. I mean, you could go back and look at it and say it's the center's fault, it's Justin Fields' fault. I don't know. I put out my 53-man roster prediction today. I'll tell you, Nate Herbig did not make the team. Not that I think Nate Herbig isn't worth making the team, but I think you could trade him and save yourself $2 million. And if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have another option in Spencer Anderson, maybe Mason McCormick. If worst case scenario, that's where you could look to as a different option outside of Nate Herbig. And when it comes to Justin Fields, maybe right now he's pretty firmly in the back seat of Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson is the starting quarterback. When you watch that, before I give you my thoughts and my opinion on it, did you think that the quarterback battle changed at all by the end of that preseason game?
Not particularly. No. I mean, we said it on Friday morning. We said, Justin Fields can't go out there and win the job. He could go out there and lose the job, and I don't think he went out there and lost the job. Yes, there were mistakes, but it's first preseason game mistakes. And yes, I would say, looking at what happened on those exchanges, I'd say Justin Fields has as much, if not more, of a responsibility on those than Nate Herbig did. But at the same time, Fields said the same thing right after the game. He said, listen, we both got to work on it. I'll take that as my fault, and we'll move on and make sure we don't do that in the future and practice it a little bit more. So I think there were mistakes, as there were across the board on Friday, as Tomlin said several times to you guys post game. But I think when you look at it, he didn't gain any ground. I think he might have lost some ground, but he certainly didn't cost himself the job.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to say he cost himself the job, because there are points that you make there that are very good. That are very good points. I will say that I believe that Russell Wilson is very much so in pole position for this starting job after that one, simply because I think Justin had a pretty big hurdle to jump going into that game, much bigger than we expected it to be, and didn't make that jump. And I don't want to say disappointed, because I don't think he did disappoint. Like, his pass to Van Jefferson that was ruled out of bounds was definitely inbounds and a very good pass. His pass to George Pickens on it was a fake handoff turnaround. There was somebody right there. I believe it was a screen to George. It was very nice. His screen right at the beginning to Najee Harris, I thought, was excellent. He had some moments where you felt really good about Justin Fields, but there were also some moments where you were like, oh, okay, there wasn't enough oomph. Now, if Russell comes out here and does the same thing against Buffalo, maybe there just isn't any oomph. And maybe you got two guys with no oomph, and you need to figure out who brings the more upside. And at that point, it is certainly Justin Fields over Russell Wilson. But without Russell Wilson playing, I believe that Justin didn't firmly put himself in the backseat, but still has a very big hill to climb to leap Russell Wilson. But I also believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers are really banking on Russ coming in here and looking good. And quite frankly, if the Buffalo Bills play their starters, there's no guarantee that Russ comes in here and looks very good. So let me ask this question. Sorry, still adjusting to where things are and where the camera is and what I can't bump and can bump and so on and so forth. Let me ask you this question. If Russ goes out there and has the same game that Justin Fields has, do you look at this and say, okay, Justin's right back to climbing up that pole position mark than he was? And at the same time, what does Russ have to do to put this away?
If Russ goes out there and performs well against Buffalo, especially because Russ is likely, if he's playing, he's likely going to go up against the ones, then he probably pulls away enough that week one is out of the question for Justin Fields. But if Russ goes out and like you mentioned, the hypothetical of Russ going out and having the similar game to Justin Fields, where, all right, it was okay. There were certainly mistakes that you don't want a starting quarterback in the NFL to make, but he had a couple nice passes, made a few nice plays, and then Justin goes out there and dominates the twos. Then you look at that and say, all right, well, you have to weigh it differently, but still one had issues and the other one excelled against the twos. We have to kind of look at this as we're a little bit closer together than we were after week one. But again, it all depends on where you're looking at this quarterback competition. Did you see them as even last Tuesday when I was up there in camp? Because it seemed like the snap count was pretty even, but that was also Russ's first start. So I think where I'm at right now with this quarterback competition is it is Russell's job to lose still. Justin, if you lost any ground, it was a little bit on Friday, but I think that you go forward with that in mind, and then you have to reevaluate after every day and after every game, especially.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do agree with that. Like, you have to reevaluate after everyone. Now, Russ has taken significantly more first team snaps moving forward since the day you were out here. But at the same time, Russ has not played a preseason game, and I think that helped him more than anything. Is him not being on the field. Just he's gonna, what's the word where you like fall upwards. Russell is literally falling upwards. He has injured himself into pole position, an even stronger, bigger pole than he was in before, because he has not been on the field. Now, Justin looks like he was knocking that pole down real fast, but since then, it's, you're only going to analyze the bad. I think that there's more to come. I'm excited for this weekend because this is really the first test. Like, yeah, Justin against Houston, that was a big one. I understand that, but this is you will get to watch both quarterbacks, because we're 100% guessing on Russell Wilson. That's the biggest thing, is we are guessing on what Russell Wilson can do. And we have he could go out there and stink. He could be terrible. And then we could just be like, oh, okay, well, Justin's clearly the answer here. Or he could be phenomenal. He could be old Russell Wilson, where you're just like, wow, that was ridiculous. That was so smooth and effortless. You have to put him in there. I just think it's early. It's too early, and we have no idea what Russ is gonna do. And because of that, this weekend is the weekend to go about it. It's a big one, and it's an exciting one. And with that said, that's everything that's on my list today. Let's before we dive into questions, and make sure that you're tossing all of them in the chat, because we are going to answer all of them before we head out of here. We do have a quick word from our boys over at BetterHelp. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Have you ever found yourself scrolling on social media, maybe spending too much time on whatever platform you're addicted to, and thinking, man, why am I feeling down? Why do I find myself not finding the joy that social media is supposed to give me? That's because comparison is the thief of joy. And it's easy to envy other people's lives, but therapy can help. It can help you focus on what you want instead of what other people have, so you can start living your best life. I'm somebody who's advocated for therapy for a long time. You constantly see me wearing the sweatshirt, going to therapy is cool. I've reaped the benefits for years, and I think everybody who's thinking about it should add that to their agenda as well, because in one way or another, it's very helpful. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/allsteelers today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/allsteelers. All right. Appreciate our boys over at BetterHelp, as always. As we do every day, we will finish off the show answering all of your questions. I think we got a lot of them in the chat today, so please make sure that you are tossing everything that you want to hear and find out in there, and we will answer all of them. What do we got?
Let's start with Tyler Dotts, who asks, do you think the Steelers would sign Joe Milton if the Patriots place him on the practice squad? Seems to fit our offense better than Allen.
Tyler, I hope that you've been watching the show for a while, so you know just how excited I am about this question, because Joe Milton was my dude coming out of I love Joe Milton, man. I love Joe Milton. I mean, he's going to start for the Patriots, but if he doesn't start for the Patriots, I'm all about it. He's definitely a better quarterback. Kyle Allen didn't play well. Let's be honest. Kyle Allen did not play well in that preseason game. You could say he did. He could win the player of the week or whatever by Steelers.com. He didn't play well. He didn't play well. So I'd be all about Joe Milton. John Rice Plumlee, man. Let's also not forget about John Rice Plumlee. Wide receiver, kick returner. How pumped? Let me ask, how pumped were you when he caught that first kick return? Because I sat there beforehand. We were eating. They feed us before the games. We're eating in the cafeteria. And I'm like, man, dude, all I want in this preseason game. I said it to you. All I want in this preseason game. And you said to me, I think that was your takeaway. You're the one thing you were looking for was John Rice taking a punt. How pumped were you when he was back there?
Jumped out of my seat. I was ready. I was like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. He didn't take it to the house, which I was hoping for and expecting, to be completely honest, John. You let me down a little bit there, but no, I was excited to see him grab that.
I was in that scrum after the game, and I laughed. I laughed out loud when he said, "Yeah." My first thought was, "This is either going to the house or it's either a house call or a 911 call," and I was cracking up. That was such a good move. I also, speaking of crazy special teams, asked Cameron Johnston if he's ever laid somebody out like that before after smoking Tank Dell on the sideline, and he laughed and he said, "No, but it was pretty awesome." And I was like, "Yeah, dude, I was fired up in the box." So gosh, shout out to special teams, man. But yeah, let's not forget John Rice Plumlee.
Malcolm Fox wants to know, were the snap fumbles Justin's fault or Herbig's fault, and why?
I think it was a little bit of both. Now, you have to really, like, that's the part, is the first one was probably Justin. Like, you saw Justin kind of pull his hands away a little bit too early, but you just don't know what the chemistry is like. You don't know what the nerves are like. You don't know what's going on. I mean, Herbig's never played center. It started center in a game like that. He's played center before. It's just, I don't know. You have to go back and really analyze. I think it is a little bit of both. I think they're both at fault for those ones. I think anytime there's a missed snap, if it's not rolling on the ground, because just like a regular snap, that just means that the handoff was wrong. And that means that the quarterback's pulling away and the center's moving forward all at the same time. So I would say it was a little bit of both.
Cynthia Edwards asks, what running backs could the Steelers get if they decide to pay Jalen over Najee and let Najee walk next year?
I mean, they could get anybody. I don't know who's going to be a free agent, but if I had to guess, they're going to look in the NFL draft. They're going to look third, fourth round NFL draft, mid-round guys to come in here and be somebody, and they will pay Jalen over Najee because Jalen, you could tender for $1 to $2 million a year, and Najee is going to be $7 to $10 million a year, and it's just a different situation.
Let's go to Marlon's question, who wants to know, did you like what you saw from Arthur Smith's offense in the first chance he had? I loved the play designs.
Yeah, I mean, Arthur Smith's offense was great. It was phenomenal, actually. Like, it was a very good looking offense. It was a fluid offense. The first team offense was much better designed than the second team offense, but even the second team offense, you saw guys get schemed open. That was very impressive. There was even a route early in the game where Van Jefferson and George Pickens were the only wide receivers running routes. It was clearly a pass, and they were both going in the same general direction, and they were still open. And my thought was just like, that doesn't make sense, but it did at the time. So, yeah, I was very impressed with Arthur Smith's offense. The entire thing. It was the first time in a long time that you saw motion in a game for the Pittsburgh Steelers that made sense. So, shout out Arthur Smith.
Let's go over to X Concepts, who says, why didn't Van Jefferson argue his catch to the refs? He just smiled and walked off and did nothing. It's crazy how everyone immediately blames Coach D, but not the refs or Van.
Well, Van Jefferson isn't going to change that call. I mean, he could go over there and he could complain all day long. They could care less what Van Jefferson is saying. It is definitely the refs and Mike T and whoever's up in the box supposed to be giving the calls to Mike T should have said, hey, you should challenge that. A classic Mike Tomlin, not good at challenging plays. Bad call by the refs, awful call by the refs, because that was, or New York. Like, I don't know if New York's a thing in the playoffs, but how you missed that one, I have no idea. It was a bad call, though.
DJ Thomas says, he asked earlier about the cornerback position. Do you think the Steelers should go out and get Stephon Gilmore, or did you see enough to this point to be confident in the cornerback room?
That's tough because I haven't seen enough to be confident in the cornerback room. That's clearly like Darius Rush didn't play very well. Kalen Barnes didn't play very well. Anthony Averett, I thought, was the most impressive corner of the backups in the preseason game. Corey Trice, they're going to start testing more and more. He played a lot today and yesterday, but really a lot with the starters today. I believe that's the direction that they're going in. They're going to try to test Corey Trice, see where they're at with him, and then move forward from there. But for right now, it's a wait and see what you got in those guys before you go and get a Stephon Gilmore or Patrick Peterson. And they're going to give it a couple of days. I think that's why Dante Jackson's resting, because they want Corey Trice to be out there. And this is an excuse to get him out there without stirring the pot or any headlines of Corey Trice is taking first team reps. It's just to test him and see where he is.
Potato Salad is back in the chat, says, how we doing, Nick and Noah? Do you think the Steelers beat down the Falcons in week 1 at Atlanta as a revenge game for Arthur Smith, or are the Falcons going to know his number and it's close or a loss?
I don't know if it's going to be a beatdown by the Steelers, but I do take the Steelers in week 1 over the Falcons. I think it's a revenge game, but I believe Arthur Smith is a much better offensive coordinator than he was a head coach, and that plays a very significant role in the outcome of these things. I also believe that the Falcons are dealing with a lot of injuries. They're not as complete of a team as there's a reason that they were the 8th worst team in the NFL last season, and Kirk Cousins is good, but he's not changing that entire thing. So I would say there's a chance that Atlanta is decent this year. They have a lot of talent, but they're also missing a lot of pieces, and we'll see what happens. So I would still say Steelers win, but I wouldn't say a beatdown.
X Concept says, what are Jaray Jenkins' chances of making the roster? He made some nice plays later in the game on Friday.
Yeah, I would say slim, but still a practice squad guy who could find himself in Pittsburgh this season. I thought he played well too. I think he's played decent during training camp as well. He's been a guy that I've had my eye on who has impressed me. So he's definitely made some plays. He's a name to watch. I don't think he makes the roster. It's just too difficult to climb up that ladder where he is, but I could see him as a practice squad guy.
Malcolm Fox has another question here saying, I feel like we relied on big plays too much on scoring drives. Was the offense consistent enough, or should I not worry about the preseason?
You should not worry about the preseason. That's step one. Don't worry about the preseason. Last year, we all saw what happened when we worried about the preseason. Number 2 to that question is, I mean, there were big play scoring drives, but I'm not really concerned about the second team or third team, anybody. If it's a position that I'm watching, that I'm concerned about it, like running back was a good one, and tight end was another good one. Connor Hayward, I thought, had a good game. Calvin Austin had a good game. The corners, Anthony Averett, I thought, had a good game. Ryan Watts had a decent game, and same with Corey Trice. But when it comes to I don't care about Kyle Allen. I really just don't care what he does in a football game. It doesn't mean anything to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they're going to keep him as the quarterback 3 no matter what. So I don't know if I'm looking at that and necessarily saying scoring plays is what I'm evaluating. I'm more so just saying who had a consistent play-to-play good game in the second half. That's what I'm looking at.
Nick Rose wants to talk about the offensive line, saying, what do you think about not re-signing James Daniels or Isaac Seumalo and playing Mason McCormick and Troy Fautanu at both guard spots?
Oh, I don't like them. I don't like the Mason McCormick in there. So next year, yeah, if we're going to talk, so if you're going to line this question up with next year, so Isaac still has another year on his deal. He's not going anywhere after this season. James Daniels is most likely going to be gone. You could start Mason McCormick and then Isaac or Spencer Anderson. I think Spencer Anderson played really well in the preseason game. He looked pretty good, and he got compliments from everybody. So he's a name certainly to watch for the Pittsburgh Steelers moving forward. He's young. He's developing. The Steelers like him a lot, and he's versatile. If he's already filling in for Isaac now, why couldn't he fill in for James next year? I think it'll be a very fun position battle between Mason McCormick and Spencer Anderson in a year from now.
Let's go to Alexander's question. He says, since George Pickens is seemingly a locker room cancer and San Fran wants a wide receiver in return, why not trade George for Brandon Aiyuk and draft a wide receiver in the first or second round next year?
I get that the George Pickens thing has some issues. I agree. I don't disagree that George Pickens causes issues for the Pittsburgh Steelers quite a bit. What I will say is George Pickens is worth keeping around until you don't have to keep him around anymore. Now, he could be the next man out, certainly. But right now, if you could get Brandon Aiyuk and not give up George Pickens, that's a pretty good deal for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I understand the concept of the question. I don't believe that the Steelers are looking to give up somebody to get somebody, but I do think that it could be a reason. I think it's a better argument to say you get Brandon Aiyuk and stop worrying about George Pickens' contract instead of trade George Pickens for Brandon Aiyuk.
Let's go to Sean's question next. He wants to know if there was any truth to that maybe Devontae Adams would be available for picks. Why do you not walk down that path and stay away from the 49ers overbloated once?
Can you look up Devontae Adams' contract? Because we talked about this before. It's $40-some million next year or something in cap space that he's taken up, and it's like 20-something that you're hitting in dead money just to get rid of him. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, this year his cap hit is 25.3. The next 2 seasons after that, $44.1 million.
Yeah, that's just too much money, man. It's just way too much money. Now, if it was reasonable, if it was under 30 the next 2 years, cool. Yeah, why not? But it's just way too much money.
Let's go to Peter's question next. Says, how do Beanie Bishop and Jalen Warren both wear number 30? And is that allowed in a real game?
No. So when you have a 90-man roster, you don't have enough numbers. So your offense and your defense are both allowed to wear the same numbers. But if Beanie Bishop makes the roster, he will have to change his number. So don't get comfortable with Beanie in 30 because he will not be in 30. And at the same time, maybe don't get comfortable with Anthony Averett in 18 because, he's got some pretty good competition on offense in a guy named John Rice Plumlee.
Marlon has another question here saying, based on how they're practicing, couldn't they squeeze Justin in against the Bills ones at some point this upcoming weekend?
Yeah, I think both of them will get, depending on how much Russ plays. I could see the Steelers doing a half of a quarter with Russ and then the other half with Justin Fields, and then Justin Fields will finish off the half, and then Kyle Allen will play in the second half with John Rice Plumlee, probably getting a couple of reps at quarterback as well. So I would guess that's how it rolls. Russ, I don't believe plays more than maybe 2 drives, 3 max, but I would guess 2, especially if they score a touchdown.
Doug says, I see a common issue with both Wilson and Fields. They both hold the ball too long. Is this something that Fields can fix, or is it something he'll always struggle with?
It is a concern. That's the biggest problem with quarterbacks, and our concern with quarterbacks is when they hold on to the ball too long, when the post-snap processing is just so slow that they make mistakes. That's when it becomes like can you beat that if you're a quarterback? That's the biggest question with Justin Fields. Nothing else. He can work on the mechanics. He can work on the footwork. He can work on his release, whatever. When it comes to that post-snap processing and it is slow, can you beat that? That's the biggest question, the biggest if with a quarterback. That's the biggest if with Justin Fields. As for Russ, yeah, he gets himself into sacks, but it's not slow processing. It's more so playing hero ball. I think you could beat that a little bit easier.
Let's go over to Trey's question. Says, genuinely, who do you feel is the better fit after seeing Fields in practices and limited snaps in the preseason?
I think right now, can I say both? Is both an answer? I don't know who would be the better fit. I think Russ is the easier fit. I think you could worry less about Russ and what he could do to the offense because I think both of them fit. I also think Arthur Smith can design an offense around both of these guys that works very well. So I would say both. I would say Russ is the easy answer. Justin is the exciting answer. But Arthur Smith can do what he wants for both of these guys. I think both of these guys are great options for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Let's go to Carl Spackler's question. Says, hey, Noah, thoughts on this trade? We send James Daniels and a second rounder to Washington. They send a first, second, and a player to the Niners. And the Niners send Aiyuk and a 5th to Washington. Washington sends us, wow, this is intense. Washington also sends the Steelers McLaurin and a 5th.
All right, let's break this down here. So James Daniels and a second rounder to the Commanders, okay? The Commanders then send a first and a second and a player to the 49ers. They get in return Brandon Aiyuk and a 5th rounder. I think that's where we've come into the first issue here is why are you giving up Terry McLaurin for Brandon Aiyuk and a 1st-round pick and a 2nd-round pick? That's just a lot going on right there. Mm-hmm. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is a steal to give up James Daniels as a 2nd-round pick, and you walk away with Terry McLaurin and a 5th-round pick. That's the easiest thing you can do. I think the Washington Commanders, as crazy as the Washington Commanders are, and maybe as sporadic and dumb as they can be as an organization, I think they're getting fleeced a little bit too much in this one for it to make some sense. That's a lot of draft. You're giving up Terry McLaurin, a 1st, a 2nd, and a player for Brandon Aiyuk and a 5th. That's a lot going on right there.
Yeah, Commanders' new general manager, Adam Peters, he's done good to this point, but he would be out the door very quickly. And I know that he was from San Francisco, so there might be a lot of desire there, but I don't think he'd be able to give up that much.
That's a lot going on.
Let's go over to Spider's question, who wants to know, does Ryan Shazier have an official position with the Pittsburgh Steelers?
No, it's not really official. He's working with the running backs and running backs coach Eddie Faulkner. I don't think it's official, but he came to Eddie this offseason to kind of work with them. So I believe it's something that they're going to work with throughout the season. It's cool to have him around, and he gets people fired up. He talks a lot of smack on the sidelines, which is it's good because that's what you need, because Denzel Martin is on the other side talking a ton of smack. So you need Ryan Shazier to kind of back that up on the offensive side of the ball. So it's good to have, but I don't think it's an official position yet. I believe it'll come maybe just like an offensive assistant coach or something like that.
Caleb wants to know, speaking of that last mock trade that we talked about from Carl, he says, do you think we do a 3-team trade for Brandon Aiyuk? Because I heard the 49ers are looking to trade for CeeDee Lamb with picks the Steelers give. That one's an interesting three-way there.
Interesting three-way trade. Jerry Jones would do that just for the media, just for the headlines. He would do that just for the headlines. I mean, I could see it happening. I could see a three-way trade happening. I think it's wild, but the 49ers seem to be all in on making this thing work. So if that's what you want to do, cool. But I don't see how it goes down and works properly. And if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think I'm kind of jumping on the CeeDee Lamb train and seeing what I could get for CeeDee Lamb, because why not? Like, if you're going to go pay somebody $28 million and CeeDee Lamb is worth a 3rd-round pick and some change, and the 49ers want 2 firsts or 2nd and a 3rd for Brandon Aiyuk, why not try to make that work? So I think, and I also think the Dallas Cowboys would give up CeeDee Lamb for cheaper because of their stubbornness more than the 49ers would. So I would just jump on that. But I mean, I think a 3-team trade is somehow an option at this point in the cycle.
Yeah, the 49ers seem that they're trying to find any way, shape, or form to get something back for this year in exchange for Aiyuk if they're going to trade him. So let's move down to Joseph Fontenot's question. Thank you and appreciate you as always. He says,
yes, sir.
Do y'all think Peyton Wilson will become a starter at some point this year?
Yeah, I do believe he'll become a starter. Now, that being said, I believe that all 3 of them are starters. I believe that, I mean, Elandon Roberts is a starter and Patrick Queen is the guy, but I believe that all 3 of these guys will just kind of play a start. It's kind of like Najee and Jalen getting announced as starters both in the tunnel for the preseason game. Like, that's how it'll be on defense. You'll get 3 guys that get announced as starters, and say a slot corner isn't going to get announced. That's how they'll work this out, because all 3 of those guys are certainly going to be considered starters this season.
Let's go over to Dylan's question, who says, does Beanie Bishop make the 53-man roster as of right now?
Yes, I believe so. Yes. Grayland Arnold got a lot of work with the ones today, but I just don't know how you make the argument of we're going to keep Grayland Arnold, who is equally as talented as Beanie Bishop, maybe even a little bit more talented than Beanie Bishop, and get rid of a guy with so much upside. I think Beanie's got too much upside for you to avoid him, and you're not going to be able to sneak him onto the practice squad. So you have to add him to the 53-man roster.
Let's go to Melissa's question. Says, so what do you think is the chance the Steelers get Aiyuk? If not likely, what would it take to get Davante Adams outside of the money we obviously talked about before?
Yeah, I mean, Davante Adams would probably be a 2nd or a 3rd-round pick. It'd probably be right in the ballpark of what they've offered for Brandon Aiyuk. I think the chances they get Brandon Aiyuk are still pretty high. I mean, I know it's Monday. I missed that 2nd week of August. But like I said, we're going down to the last week of August. That's what I said 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to stick to it. I'm still sticking with the 70% chance. That's what I'm feeling.
Let's go over to Just a Fan, who wants to know thoughts on Joey Porter Jr. Relatively quiet camp so far. How confident should I be in the defensive backs room?
Very confident. Very confident. If you're not talking about a corner, you're in a pretty good shape. Like Dante Jackson got a bunch of recognition early of just like, he's really good, and then it quieted down. Why? Because he's good. Deshaun Elliott's the same way. Good. Don't have to talk about him. That's where Joey Porter is. Like, he's good. He's definitely got some pass interference issues, and those showed up in the preseason. They've shown up all of training camp. But he's going to be fine. I have a lot of confidence in the secondary. They look very good.
Richard Kenny says, could the Steelers adopt a dual tight end receiving threat? And I'll add to this. If they do you expect it to be heavily used by Arthur Smith in the Steelers offense?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Darnell Washington ran a route today just in individual drills that I went, ooh, that was a good route. That was a quick cut. That was nice by a big man. So I think Darnell's really coming into his own. I think the 2 tight end receiving threats definitely there. Connor Hayward too. Mike Colt Pruitt's got really reliable hands. I'm all about it. I think the tight ends are very undervalued on the Pittsburgh Steelers offense this season, and they are going to make a lot of noise.
Let's go over to Ryan's question, which is, what will the pod schedule be when the regular season begins?
Yeah, so as of right now, we're going to go back to the morning with the 9 a.m. But that being said, we've gotten some really good contact and like the viewership right now is nice. Like we got a lot of you guys who catch this live, and that's the main goal, is to make sure that we get to jump on here and answer all your questions. So maybe there's a conversation to be had for a later in the afternoon podcast, but we'll figure that out before next week.
Vibing with the Dogs wants to ask, do they play Dan Moore at left tackle or Broderick? Because it seems like they want to make Jones a swing tackle almost.
No. Jones is only playing right tackle right now because Dan Moore could only play left tackle. So it's not, Broderick's not going to be a swing. He's going to be the left tackle. Broderick's only playing swing or both sides right now because Dan could only play one side. So it'll be Broderick. Dan's got to learn to play the right side. If he doesn't, that's why I think you keep a guy like Dylan Cook who could.
Andre Washington says, would you agree that Russell is Steelers' only NFL-ready quarterback? I'm just not sure that Justin's unlocked potential will ever be unleashed.
No. I don't think NFL-ready quarterback. I think Justin's an NFL-ready quarterback. I think he's fine. I think if it was another team, he'd be the starting quarterback, and there'd be a bunch of talk about how exciting he is and so on and so forth. Just because you're not out there and you have another competition that might beat you out doesn't mean that you're not NFL ready. I mean, Justin Fields is good, and he's probably the best backup in the NFL. So, yes, he's definitely NFL ready. I think people try to tie him into like the Trey Lance stuff like that. No, he is much better than that. I think Justin's NFL ready for sure. Russell's just more reliable, and I think that's why the Steelers look at him as pole position.
Carl Spackler's looking into the future with this one, saying, what do you think it would take for us to get Arch Manning at the draft in Pittsburgh? I'm hoping it comes true. I'm just not sure if we could give up enough to get him.
What a scenario there. Could you imagine if Roger Goodell went and drafted Arch Manning with the first pick of the 2026 NFL draft in the city of Pittsburgh and things went nuts? That would be awesome. That would be awesome. I'll tell you what it takes. It takes Russell Wilson signing a one more deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then them trading the house to go up and get Arch Manning with the first pick in the draft, which will probably get rid of 3-4 first rounders for the next years to come, plus some players and some other draft capital. It would be a boatload of picks, but like never say never, I guess, right? Never say never.
Let's go to Paul Legg, who wants to know, what is the starting offensive line this year in week 1 if you had to project right now?
I'd go, after Jerry's report, I'm going to go Broderick Jones at left tackle, Isaac Seumalo at left guard, Zach Frazier at center. It's crazy that Zach Frazier isn't the starting center yet. James Daniels at right guard. Did I get that? Yeah, James Daniels is the right guard. And then Troy Fautanu at the right tackle. That's where I'm going with.
Let's go to DJ Thomas, who says, if the Steelers get Brandon Aiyuk, do you think Calvin Austin III has a lot of deep balls thrown to him this year? Best cornerback on Brandon Aiyuk, double on GP, plus 2 tight ends, 2 running backs, and 2 mobile quarterbacks. How do I guard that?
You don't. And that's why it'll work, is because you don't. That's the difference. Like we've talked about it. And obviously execution beats everything. You could draw it all up on paper and it's not going to look the same as it is on the field. We say it all the time, like Brandon Aiyuk doesn't change how many wins and losses the Pittsburgh Steelers have. It rather just makes them a much stronger contender for a Super Bowl. So that's where we stand, is you won't be able to stop all of that all the time, and you're going to run into issues as a defense. That's why you go get Brandon Aiyuk.
GP wants to know, will you guys be at any of the home games this season? If so, we got to dap up.
Oh, yes, sir. Just find me walking through the parking lot. That's the best advice. Get there bright and early and find me walking through the parking lot. I'm at every single home game. We have had conversations on here about a potential, all Steelers talk tailgate something. We'll figure that out. But yeah, I'm at every home game. So if you see me walking, hit me up.
Doing the walk over. Keep your eyes peeled for that.
Yeah, definitely come up. If I'm doing the walk over, man, come interrupt me. I'm all about it. Come interrupt me.
Me 24/7 says, with y'all being Tomlin sympathetic, if this team doesn't make and win a playoff game this year, will he get to coach out this current contract?
Yes. Yes. The answer is yes. Like, would I have signed him to a contract extension this season? No, I probably wouldn't have. Would I have signed him to a 3-year contract extension? Definitely not. But the Steelers did. I don't get to make those phone calls. I don't get to make those decisions. And quite frankly, Mike Tomlin and me, we probably wouldn't be good friends if we were negotiating. So not that we're good friends now, but I think that he will play out the rest of his contract no matter what. Yes.
Turk Hollinger says, do you think that Darnell Washington will get more looks this year than he did previously?
Yes, definitely. I think Darnell Washington's a sleeper right now. I think he could be very involved in this offense. He looks very good this offseason. I think this is a big year for Darnell Washington. And including, like, today they tossed him one up in the red zone, and he got a little fancy with it and went up to go get it one-handed. He shouldn't have done that. But if he can learn to go up and get it two hands and realize I'm much taller than everybody else here, I think he's going to be very valuable.
Raymond asks, which running back do you think will have higher targets out of the backfield this year?
Jaylen Warren. It'll definitely be Jaylen Warren. Najee's going to get a good chunk of targets. Definitely. He's going to be utilized a lot, but Jaylen Warren's a receiving back. So I would say Jaylen Warren.
And let's finish it off with this one. The question is, why lowball the Aiyuk trade if he makes such a difference for the Steelers offense?
This is a good question. It's because you have too many questions to take a risk, because he makes such a difference to the Pittsburgh Steelers offense and to their contender status in 2024. But if Russell Wilson and Justin Fields don't work out, or if there's a devastating injury or whatever, Patrick Mahomes is just unbeatable and you can't, no matter who you are, you're not going to beat him. If any of those things happen, plus a billion other things that could happen, and you just spent all of your draft capital and all of your money on Brandon Aiyuk, plus you gave up players and so on and so forth, you've just dug yourself a hole much deeper than the 2024 season. So yes, he increases your stock, but you have to take everything into account to set a bar of what are we willing to give up to improve X amount. And you have to find that middle ground. And I don't think that a first round pick, I don't think that a boatload of picks is worth it, because what if Russ and Justin don't work out and you find yourself, worst case scenario, the Pittsburgh Steelers, like worst case scenario for any team, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the worst team in the NFL this year. And they gave up their first round pick and $30 million a year to the San Francisco 49ers, who can now go and draft Shadir Sanders or Brock Carson or Carson Beck, or any of those guys, and the Steelers are left without a quarterback and no first round pick for another season. So you have to weigh good and bad and what the risk is, and you have to draw a line somewhere.
That's a wrap for today.
Awesome. With that said, guys, we are going to head out of here. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, please find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We will be back tomorrow. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.